So I'll start with the session. Today's conversation is centered around a question that many of us have been thinking about, whether we are just at the beginning of our careers, whether we are considering a transition, or we are trying to stay relevant in the work that we already do. We are trying to understand how we can build a career that remains sustainable when the industry around us is changing. So, when the job descriptions change, when new tools appear every month, when teams become more leaner, and when AI actually starts reshaping not how we work, but also what sort of work actually exists and what all can we hold on to. Is it a particular qualification? Is it a company name, a brand name? Is it a technical skill? Is it a strong network? Or the ability to keep learning or to adapt and keep making choices as things change? So, this is what we're trying to unpack today through our session. It's called Beyond the Hype, Building a Sustainable Career in a Changing Technology Industry. So, for those who are joining us for the first time, I'm Vatsla Srivastava. I am the president of the Internet Society India Mumbai chapter. I will be moderating today's conversation. So, my own work has been at the intersections of public policy, digital governance, strategic comms, and stakeholder engagement. And one of the things that our chapter cares deeply about is to making technology conversations more accessible to people who might not come from conventional tech backgrounds. The idea is to have a practical, reflective, and honest conversation, one that allows us to understand how careers are actually built, what all changes are there with all its detours and uncertainties around. I will also quickly talk about the Internet Society, which is a global non for profit, community driven organization working to ensure that the Internet remains safe, open, globally connected, secure, and trustworthy. It is supported by a network of more than 150,000 community members and volunteers with over 120 chapters across the globe. We have communities working across countries and regions around the world. It is a network that brings together policymakers, researchers, technologists, civil society practitioners, community leaders, students, and many other who actually care about how the internet is built, how it is governed, and how it is used. When you join an Internet Society event, you're not only attending one stand alone conversation, you are entering a much larger global community of people who think very seriously about technology and access, safety, policy, and the future of internet. The Internet Society India Mumbai chapter is an all women led chapter, and it's also an accredited ICANN at large structure where our work primarily focuses on having conversations and capacity building around internet governance, digital policy, emerging tech, and making the internet again more accessible, inclusive, and relevant to wider communities. A large part of our work is also driven by one single belief that the internet is not just a technical system, and we usually represent the issues of the end user. It also shapes how we work and communicate and learn and participate. And that means that we understand that technology cannot remain limited just to engineers and technical expert or institutional spaces which are mostly closed. Through our events and learning programs and community initiatives, we are trying to create spaces where people from different backgrounds can understand these issues, they can contribute to them, and they can also see where they belong in the wider internet governance ecosystem. Okay, now I just want to give a brief about WITL, which is the Women in Technology Leadership Series, which is now in its eighth edition, the eighth year of it. And I'm very excited that we are starting the series, kicking things off today. This is the first session under the eighth edition. So, WITL, or Women in Technology Leadership Series, was created because we believe that women need more than just generic information, generic inspiration, or very well polished, well crafted success stories. I think women need to understand how careers are actually built, what are the skills that matter, what are the different pathways available into technology, how professional networks are developed over time, how do people navigate between transition and uncertainty, and how authority is built in spaces which are not dominated by women. So, technology leadership, again, is not limited to coding and engineering. It also includes other things like strategy, operations, policy, law, communications, governance, entrepreneurship, even community building. So, WITL is meant to make these pathways more visible and easier to understand, particularly for women and professionals from non tech or non STEM backgrounds. So, the idea is that we are going to focus on how to improve visibility, access, demystification of career paths, and bring in more at the center of our WITL series. Okay, so now I will be introducing our speaker. It is my pleasure to welcome our speaker today, Miss Rakshita Kulshrestha. Thank you so much for joining us today. She is the manager of global response operations at Meta in Singapore, the APAC region. Rakshita entered the tech industry through campus recruitment soon after graduating from Lady Shri Ram College, University of Delhi. Over more than a decade, her career has taken her across sales, strategy, operations, trust and safety, and global response, as well as across different organizational and geographical contexts. She has also experienced a non-linear career path where she actually stepped outside the large tech organization that she was working at and worked in a startup environment and then later returned back to it, which I feel makes her journey all the more relevant to today's conversation. She has seen the tech industry evolve through major shifts and has had to learn, adapt, build new capabilities, and develop relationships along the way. So, Rakshita is joining us today in her personal capacity, and she will be speaking from her own professional and experiences and her journey along the way. So, thank you so much. We're so happy to have you with us. I think the first question, I think, is a big basic question that we want to start off from where it all started. Rakshita, you joined Facebook, then Facebook, now Meta, straight out of college placements, campus placements. And I think at that time, it was a very different movement in the tech industry. I want you to take us through what the industry looked like back then. And what do you think has changed the most for you since?
Thanks, Vatsla, and thanks everyone for joining today. I know you guys are all joining from different time zones, making time on a Saturday for this. So I really appreciate that. And hopefully, the next hour together can be a value add for you all in some ways. Super happy to be here. Thanks, Vatsala. To your question, yes, I did join right out of college. Back then, Facebook used to have campus placements. So it came to my college. I applied. I wasn't even sure what I was applying for. It was one of those out of college, let's figure life out sort of a decision. And luckily, I made it and I joined what was then called user operations. So it wasn't even called trust and safety back in 2011. And that should tell you where we were at and where we are now today. So back then, it was a 2,100 employee company, very small. We were discussing problems like, oh, how do we move from, I think we were at a couple million users and we wanted to think about how do we get to a billion and how do we scale as we get to that many users. And on the side, how do we think about advertising, digital marketing? All of these concepts were evolving, but they weren't as established as we look at them today. And that was quite interesting because every day, every week, you were solving a problem that didn't exist before because suddenly users, advertisers were using the platform in ways they hadn't used before. And that was creating problems that didn't exist before. And that's what made it a very exciting job because every day was a different day, every week was a different week. You were solving some very fundamental problems, you were writing some very fundamental policies, a lot of which didn't exist. And also, over time, people got very creative in the way they use the platform for good and for bad. And we as a company had to keep up with it. When it comes to trust and safety, I joined into user operations, which eventually was the trust and safety operations. There were very few tech companies that even had this business function at the time. A lot of medium to small companies did not even have this. So it wasn't a well established industry in itself. And that's been the most fascinating part for me. From 2011 to maybe around 2015, 16, when trust and safety, through several different reasons, started to become more and more prominent. It started to become something that people evolved into different courses. There were certifications. Now we have a lot of trust and safety events, and it's a whole work stream of its own now, and there's a whole career path associated with it. Back in 2011, none of that existed. So it's been very amazing to be at the start of something like that and see it evolve over the years into what it is today. I think cut to now, Meta is like a 75,000 employee company. So you can imagine how much the scale has changed and shifted, and similarly, the roles have changed and shifted as well. We're also now at that inflection point again in tech where we're thinking about what does this mean in context of AI? So trust and safety so far has been great. We've understood everything. We spent a good 10 to 15 years on it. And now we have a new challenge in terms of how do we incorporate all of this in the new AI world. And I think that's also exciting because that gives you sort of space to explore, again, a problem that has not been explored before, work on it, solve for it, and evolve it as the industry is evolving.
Thank you for describing your journey so beautifully. I want to understand from you, because your career, it has moved across different roles, worked in strategy, you worked in ops, trust and safety, as you mentioned, and global response. What do you think helped you move through all these varied functions without maybe losing direction? What are the skills that traveled with you across these roles? If there are certain skills that built from the scratch, and what are the transferable skills in here? And was there a need to reinvent yourself with each role moving forward? So maybe if you could talk about specifically your journey across the roles and the functions that you've transitioned into.
Yeah, of course. So I think I did spend about 6.5 to 7 years in trust and safety. But even within that, there were different roles that I worked on. So I worked on specific problem areas like hate speech, impersonation. There's several problem areas that I worked on. And then I also worked a lot in risk mitigation. So, how do you get ahead of some of the risky situations that manifest on social media platforms? And also dealing with PR fires, regulatory risks, all of that. So, when I say 6 to 7 years, there were different roles even within trust and safety, which gave me a very good overview of how this business function operates. At the core of all of it, I am a slightly more data and operations focused person. So I was a lot more focused on what's really happening at scale. How do we build solutions at scale? So constantly thinking about that as well while solving for these problems. One of the things that happens when you spend that amount of time in a specific business function is you feel like that's it for you. Who's going to hire me in a different business function because I have no knowledge of sales or anything else? And I think at the time it was quite interesting because after that amount of time, I had two options. One was potentially moving out into a different organization or growing into like a more managerial leadership position. And I chose the former. The reason for that was there's a lot to learn. When it comes to tech industry, there is a lot of different parts of the business. And unless you understand a significant part of it, you operate in a silo. And that was the reason I did want to go over to the sales side and really understand how does our business really work. I knew about it, but I didn't really know about it until I did the job myself. And I think that is an interesting piece in my career journey for me as well, because I had to do a lot of like telling yourself the same narrative over and over again. So there's a lot of unlearning that I had to go through to make the transition. And I think it's important every time you're switching roles, your organization goes through a restructure, your manager or team changes. There is a learning, but there's also an unlearning because we are very used to operating from what we know and going forward with it. But taking that pause, unlearning, creating space for new things is really important. And for me, when I was making that transition from trust and safety to sales, was a really big part of the transition because I thought, oh, I've been in the company, I know everything, I know how these things operate. But obviously, when you go over to a completely different business function, you have to spend some time unlearning. The other piece that I really think worked for me and I highly recommend it to people is just curiosity and problem solving. As long as you stay curious, as long as you keep identifying problems to solve, you will continue to grow and move in your career. We used to say this at then Facebook, like nothing at Facebook is anybody else's problem. And I really believe in it. Anytime you spot something, either you're capable of solving it or you're capable of finding the right people to help you solve it. And pushing along from that mindset and enabling your team, your company to grow is what kind of takes you a lot forward and enables you to learn a completely new skill. Sales was something I didn't know. I didn't even know what metrics existed. I had to completely start from scratch like a beginner. So I think when you're curious, when you want to solve your problems, and you stick to those things, you are able to, one, become an expert, which is really important anytime you're switching roles. And it also allows you to not just think about your career trajectory vertically upwards, go from one level to the next, but also laterally, horizontally, like what are different ways you can grow and develop your career and become more holistic in the way you solve for problems. And when I did sales, I also moved back. I left the company, went to a startup to do some trust and safety work, came back into sales, came back into trust and safety. So all of those jumps, essentially, I feel like the unlearning piece, staying curious, all of that really helped me. And I think one other piece I do want to highlight is we also, when we spend so much time in a specific kind of role, we assume this is all we can do, which I was referring to earlier, but really identifying where your strengths lie. And one, I think as women, we're not very good at calling them out. We might know it, but it takes us a while to acknowledge it, call it out, speak it out in an interview. It's very important to do those things as you are making those transitions. And your identity is not defined by the one role that you have done for 6 years. It's defined by your problem solving skills, your network, like so many other things that contribute to it. Hopefully that answers what you were getting at. Yeah.
Yes, even more actually. That also brings me to my next question, and something that has been asked over and over again, I think, in the registrations that we were having by different people across, which is also to understand careers that exist beyond engineering and product related roles, because we have a lot of people in our audience, including myself. I come from a non tech, non STEM background. And the idea in general is that, of course, like I said, there are certain careers that people might still not be aware about because, of course, there are more visible roles like engineering or product designing. For somebody who's looking at the tech industry at this point in time from the outside, what careers do you think, pathways you think can exist beyond just engineering and product designing? We'll also talk about AI eventually. But from your experience, if you could tell us a little bit more about what exact pathways that we could be looking at in terms of your experience also over the years.
Yeah, of course. So let's go back to the 75,000 employees. 75,000 is a big number. So that should tell you that there are far more roles than what are visible. I think you also alluded to in the beginning, we always assume maybe sales, engineering, product, like these are the only roles that exist in tech. But if you have that many employees, there are probably a lot more. And one way to think about it is, and specifically for people listening to this, if you're trying to identify what role would I be interested in, like what can I do, I would suggest thinking about it from a problem solver mindset. What kind of problems do you enjoy solving? And when it comes to that, what kind of problems do you enjoy solving for a company? So you could enjoy solving a sales business development related problem, which means you go into sales, business development, marketing science, like those kind of digital marketing kind of roles. You could really enjoy investigative policy related work, and you could get into risk management, you could get into trust and safety, multiple kinds of roles. And that sort of like the roles that I was talking about I had before. If you love working with governments, if you're from a legal background, there are like public policy, comms, legal related roles that you could be involved in. If you love building things, you could become an engineer. So there is like, I would break it down to just start thinking about the kind of problems that you would enjoy solving and then navigating from there in terms of what kind of roles exist. One of the things that I would also highly recommend is, let's say you've identified 5 companies that you're very interested in tech, looking at their careers job portal maybe once a week, once in 2 weeks. That should give you a sense of what kind of jobs are opening up. Reading those job descriptions, really internalizing what kind of things, skills are companies hiring for, and then going in from there to really understand where are you placed, which role interested you more, which one would you like to navigate. Because again, not every role needs to be a product role, not every role needs to be an engineering role. There is just so much out there within the tech industry. And we also hire in within Meta, we hire from varied backgrounds. We hire from journalism, we hire from legal backgrounds, we hire from engineering backgrounds, like you name it. And all, like, I have colleagues from some or the other sort of space in that direction. The other thing I would say is with AI, and we'll probably touch on this a bit later as well, some of these roles are obviously evolving and changing, and we have to think about it in that context as well as we look forward 2 years, 5 years down the line. And we can chat about that a bit later too, but I did want to caveat that there is an AI aspect to all of these roles and how things are evolving.
Sure. Now that you've also brought it up, the elephant in the room, I think one of the few things that we're also trying to look into AI and how the current landscape is changing and how does one stay relevant, because we talk about the AI bubble and there is a lot of speculation in and around, and there is also a lot of excitement around AI, of course, but also there is a lot of anxiety with how the current global scenario is moving. Teams are becoming leaner, there are multiple layoffs, roles are changing as we speak. After every 6 months, there's a new technology coming up altogether. And there is that fear or anxiety as to will we still be relevant? Will our skills still be relevant? And I think I would want to understand from you, how do you see this in your professional experience? What do you think in terms of what skills would become valuable to us at this point in time? And and what can people actually do in terms of staying adaptable without feeling that they have to also do five jobs at once? Because of course, AI is there to help you in that sense. And maybe a little bit more about AI disruption. And of course, there are structural changes happening as well. And I think in our conversation, what we discussed earlier about this session as well, I'm sure in your organization as well, there were a lot of structural changes and you had to adopt with them. There were layoffs, and it's an open secret now that roles are being redesigned. Of course, there is a lot of panic around it. How do you see the situation, and what do you think can be done at this point in time?
I think there's a lot to unpack on this front. I'll start with acknowledging. I can take an example. So in tech, I don't even want to say traditional, but so far we've had roles like engineering, product engineer, product manager, data scientist, very well known roles. But today, me, who comes with a non technical background, I can do a little bit of engineering. I can do a little bit of product management. I can do a bit of data science related work, given the tools available and accessible to me. So, what does that really mean? Does that mean that these roles are not going to exist in the future? I don't think that's true. And I don't think we as an industry are also operating that way. The reason for that is I will be able to do this at a very surface level. I need to know how to use these tools to be able to go much deeper. So we still need the experts. We still need expertise when it comes to troubleshooting, really understanding if AI is giving you the right outputs, understanding and working with AI the right way. And unless you are an expert in that domain, you will not be able to do this after a certain surface level work. So I think it's important that we all really preciously hold the expertise we have in the specific domains. I wouldn't say, oh, everyone needs to go learn all kinds of AI and just forget about your industry because it's not going to be relevant in the future. That's not true. What's important is to really acknowledge where you are an expert and be very deeply an expert in that domain, and then start to build a bit of tech fluency. So let's say you are an expert in policy and you understand everything policy related, you know the implications, you know the challenges, all of that. When I say tech fluency, what I mean is you at a fundamental level being able to understand how these products work. How can you have a conversation with a technical team and driving some of those changes? So sometimes these are very independent, but these conversations are coming closer and closer because of the way the product is evolving. So I think that's one piece that I would really recommend for everyone to start doing. Right? Start building tech fluency, understand how these products work. You don't have to become an expert, but you need to understand how they work, how are they evolving, how are these versions operating, what does that mean in my policy world, what are the implications. So focusing on that, I think, is very important from irrespective of the industry you are in. Keep your expertise close, but build sort of a tech fluency. That's one part of it. I think the other things that I want to talk about will be more fluid and irrespective of what phase of technology we are in. I think these are relevant in the long term. And they also helped me a lot in my career. One is your network of people. So the people that you work with, the reputation that you build is very integral to any kind of job or role or whatever version of your current job AI evolves your role into. So making sure you're good at your job, you are helping people remember how you make them feel, people remember how you solved problems, people remember how you collaborated with them, and building a very strong reputation through that is very important because that's when that network carries you forward. It's something that I hold very dearly to me because across all of the career changes and role changes I've had, it's my network that really helped me. And I am an introvert. So, what I want to say is, it's not like I love going to networking events and having 500 people in my network, but what I prefer doing instead is building a reputation, building a network around me that can vouch for me, even if it's 20 people against 500 people on LinkedIn. So, really invest in this, spend some time on this. And sometimes your network may not help you immediately, but maybe a couple years down the line, that's something that really works out for you. So, irrespective of your roles, layoffs, whatnot, your network will carry you forward. That's an important one for us to really hold dearly, invest in, spend time on. I'll stop there because I think there's a lot more.
This is, I think, a pain point for women, I believe, who don't really come with a built-in network. And I think the way women network and the way men network is also quite different, at least in my experience. And a lot of times the idea is that not everybody comes with an existing set of network or a lot of social intellectual capital as well.
Yeah.
So how do you think people build these relationships? I think my genuine grouse is that a lot of these networking events have also become very transactional in nature these days. Of course, everybody is looking out for something from their network and all the opportunities that comes with it. But how do we also develop long-term relationships? Because you very strongly mentioned the importance of professional and personal networks at the same time. And it won't happen that you will get something on the platter at the moment you have a network. It takes time to gain trust as well at the same time. In terms of mentorship as well, I think women often struggle quite a lot in getting genuine mentorships. They don't know where exactly to find it, who will be able to help them out. The access to it is quite less in that sense. How did you manage all of that? Did you have mentors throughout your career journey? How have these things shaped you in where you are? A lot of, I would say, hiring also in the big tech and other places is driven through referrals and internal networking. So, would you want to shed some light on those things as well for people who are trying to genuinely build their own space and community and are also trying to pivot maybe to a new sector altogether? How do they start with the quote unquote the networking aspect of it? A lot of us may or may not be active on LinkedIn. You're not that active on LinkedIn. And I would say it was strange for me to see that you were not there, but now I understand where that sort of comes from. If you could discuss a little bit about this as well from your end.
Yeah, I think different people network differently. I can definitely talk about my style. I can cover a little bit about how I've seen people network as well. But like I said, I'm an introvert. I don't like going to networking events. I tried it and I felt like I made very surface level relationships that I just never went back to. And it took a lot out of me as an introvert to be there, have these conversations, think that this will convert into something. Having said that, I do know this works for a lot of people as well. They're very good at networking, but they're also very good at following through. So if that works for you, please do that. It's absolutely in no way a wrong or right way of networking, but it's just about what feels more natural to you and what feels like something you can sustain in the long run rather than just attending a one-off networking event and think that this is going to be it for me. Because I also know people get really good jobs and opportunities through these events. Both options are open. The way I function, I definitely rely on reputation. So a lot of my network is based off of my own work and the kind of partnerships I had while I was working with certain groups of people. And I think it's really important to do good work, be genuinely committed, because people can see that. They can see how reliable you are. They can see how you contributed to projects. They can see how you worked with certain people, how you solved problems, all of that. So work on that first. I think that's very important as a baseline, because if you don't have that and we go out to build a network, you don't have a lot to fall back on and say, hey, this is what I did. The other piece, which you also alluded to, is transactional versus sustainable partnerships or relationships. I agree. I think a lot of the network today is very transactional. I would say go a bit deeper than transactional. So if you have reached out or you plan to reach out to someone you don't know, let's say you plan to reach out to me for a specific role and you say, hey, I'm looking for a job in Meta. This is my resume. Can you just pass it around? That's not great. That doesn't tell me anything about anything. And I don't even know how to map your resume to the 500 jobs that are open today. The other way to do it is really go deep into what are the jobs, like I said in the beginning, what are the jobs that Meta is hiring for? What is the location you are looking at? What is the job description? Is that relevant to the problems I'm solving for? Go a bit deeper into what exactly do you need from somebody, because today we're all running short on time. Making sure you are able to do your own homework before reaching out to somebody is very important. And that's one way to reach out to strangers on LinkedIn as well. Every time I reach out to a stranger on LinkedIn, and I have, even though it feels like I have been in this company for so long, I have looked at jobs outside as well. I've left the company, I've come back. Reach out with intention, reach out with your homework, reach out with knowing exactly where you want to help or you can support. If you don't know that, just reach out of curiosity and say, hey, I really like what you're doing. I'd love to understand your world. What do you do? What kind of opportunities exist? That's fine too. So invest a bit in converting that transactional conversation into something that's a bit deeper, meaningful, action oriented. And the last piece, to which you were saying, where do we start? What if we don't have this network? I'd say start with either your peers, your colleagues, your college alumni, your batchmates, your friends of friends, your family. There will definitely be people in that immediate network of yours who you might be interested in speaking to and getting connected with. And what you will realize is when you are thoughtful, when you're curious, when you've done your homework, people are actually very helpful. They want to help you out, connect you with the right kind of people, and support you. So even while I was, after getting into the startup and even after that coming back, I was pleasantly surprised by how helpful people are and how willing they are to connect you to people they know and their network. It's just that you have to ask the right questions. So I'd say start with what you have around you. You don't have to complicate it at all. And be comfortable that out of, let's say you have 100 conversations, maybe 10 to 15 will convert. So you do have to invest a bit of time and effort into this, but you would have learned from the remaining 80 as well. So you would learn something from each of these conversations. Yeah, just do it with an open mind, do your groundwork. I think you all have people around you and in your network that you can already start connecting with and investing some time with.
I think that was a really comprehensive answer. I think you've given us everything that we can start off from, because I think networking is also something not just the mid career level people are intimidated with, it's also the students or people who are just starting off. I think that brings me to a question which I think I wanted to touch upon earlier before we also wind up. I also want to talk about risk taking in your career. So, from what I understand, you moved out of Meta for a while and you worked at a startup. And then you returned back, as you rightly mentioned. And we also know the reason that the relationships that you build over the years also compounded in a way where the transition would have been easy. I just want to understand, what did all these moves teach you about taking risks in a career like yours? And also, just to understand the reputation that you talked about, that also travels through. This is a hypothetical question. If somebody is trying to make a transition or trying to make a move and they are afraid to leave a certain recognized organization that they are a part of and are in some sort of a dilemma, what would suggest them? Should they take that plunge? Should they have a backup ready? I'm sure financial backup, of course, definitely helps in a lot of career transitions or breaks and everything. But in your experience, when could be the right time to maybe take that pivot, move industries, change careers, start from the scratch all over again?
I think this depends on the different phases of life that all of us are in with respect to at what point are you looking to take that risk. And like you said, what are the different factors around you as well? Financial is a really big part of how we make these decisions, because sometimes we also make these decisions purely based on financials, but I think you have to evaluate the whole ecosystem. In terms of risks, I would say taking risks at a point where you are confident in your expertise. I will go back to expertise as well. If you're confident about your expertise and you've spent enough time building a certain skill in a specific space, you know that this is something that will carry you through. I think those are good times to take risks. One of the things that I also suggest, and when I was leaving Meta, it's a question actually one of my mentors asked me, and it stuck with me, is are you running away from a situation or are you moving towards something? Because oftentimes we want to just leave a bad situation at work and we're like, oh, I can't deal with this anymore. I need to go somewhere else. And when you make those decisions is when you don't know what you're going towards. And it could very well not be something that you're very interested in. You go into a new place, you're going to get frustrated again in 6 months, and then you're just stuck in that loop. I think being intentional about where you are taking your risks is important, which means you need to understand why are you taking that risks? What do you think it's going to get for you? What kind of skills are you going to build along the way? Deeply thinking about that is important. So going back to my experience, when I was leaving Meta, I had just been promoted. I was doing really well. I was very happy with my team. There was absolutely no reason for me to leave. I wasn't having a tough time. I didn't leave because I hated my job. But there was a startup that was coming up and I was very interested in them. I had some friends who had joined it. It was a very small company. I just wanted to go try working out in a small people setup. And it was a risk, but it was also in a domain that I understood, and I knew that once I'm there, I will be able to deliver. So it was a calculated risk at the end of the day. So I would say make that calculated risk so you're not just making those flash decisions about moving and you move and then a few months later you struggle with it. So, yeah, that's how I think about risk taking overall. And while you're making these decisions, like one thing that worked for me was just transparency. So, my team, when I was leaving, my managers, everyone was very aware why I'm leaving and that I have an intention to come back as well. So, one of the things we all do while we're leaving a company is like, oh, yeah, okay, I'm just gonna let it be. I'm done with it anyway. But making sure you're following through till your last day, you are committed, you are in the company. There is a certain reputation that you build by really committing yourself to the job till your last day. And I think that helped me quite a lot because I came back to the same team. And it was one of those very few times when somebody reached out to me and said, hey, we have an open role. Do you want to come back? Instead of me applying and everything. So I think when you're leaving, when you're taking risks, always make sure you leave your network well informed, you're transparent. If you're struggling, you're still transparent about it. I think that builds a lot of trust in the people around you and keeps those relationships very real, very authentic.
Okay. Thank you so much. I think we will open the floor for the Q&A.
Hello, everybody. My name is Banayak Bharadwaj, and thank you so much for putting this session together. Hello, Rakshita. So, I am currently still an undergraduate student, And looking at what you had as a career is really astonishing and it's really commendable. And for somebody who will be joining the workforce in the next 6 to 8 months, I'm always really confused that how the job market is going to react, because nowadays the job market is very different from what it used to be 10 years ago or even 5 years ago when my brother joined the workforce. Now, given that I'm a computer science engineer and I have that technical background, I still also want to explore sides of non-technical aspects, the public policy or community building, perhaps. But I also think about the fact that how one should cater to the needs of the workforce. Should one be a specialist or one should be a generalist about thinking about the pathway? So, what do you think that how one, especially someone like me who is joining the workforce very soon, should think about and navigate their career towards their goal?
Yeah, that's an interesting one because you're right. We're at a very pivotal point. It gets very confusing to really think about which direction do I pick and how do I sustain it. I think I'd say at the start, it's important to pick a lane. It really helps in the beginning to understand. You can pick a lane and a year down the line say, actually, I didn't like it. Typically, when you get into the workforce, you will be working with multiple teams. So let's say you picked a lane and it's engineering. You will probably be working with 4 to 5 teams at the same time. Usually, that's a good ecosystem to also evaluate, do I like somebody else's job or do I really like my job? But pick a lane in the beginning. And as you get inside, as you build expertise, you will also look around and identify what do you really enjoy and which direction you want to go in. But building that expertise from the get-go is important. And you probably already are inclined towards one more than the others. And I would recommend just sticking with that and going with that because that's where you're naturally more yourself. You're enjoying the work, and that will show in the quality of your work as well. I actually call myself a generalist because I haven't had a specialization. I've worked in different things. People come to me for more generalized approach on, hey, here's a problem. What do you broadly think we need to do? Versus, hey, Rakshita, what do you think about this specific policy question? So it's very different, and it's up to you how you want to evolve your career eventually from there. But as you're starting out, I would recommend picking one or maybe two spaces as you're probably applying to jobs and stuff, and then going from there and identifying how you want to navigate the rest of it.
Thank you so much, Rakshita.
I hope that answered your question, Vinayak. Okay. Sarjana, you can go next.
Hi, Rakshita. Thank you so much. My question is coming from a more human perspective. And so in India, we already know that sociocultural capital works very differently. And women already have different set of challenges that they have to deal with anyway. At some point, you said that maybe look around in your personal networks. What if there are women or people that do not have that kind of capital, or even if they do have it, there are barriers to them being able to access that capital within their society, within their community, within their personal spaces? But they are talented, they're intelligent, they bring the skill sets, but they're simply not being capable to get to that point. Are there any spaces where networking or this kind of access can be made accessible to them? Because we do have a very culturally plural country, and there are people coming from very different places. So, yeah.
I think it's tough. I do understand that everyone has a different background, and sometimes it's not very accessible, sometimes it's not very comfortable reaching out, sometimes you have different kinds of barriers. But I think one thing everyone needs to invest in is being able to present yourself and being able to access that network. It's uncomfortable, it is challenging. And like I said, you might reach out to 100 people and only 20 will convert.
Correct.
But I think it's important to be able to work through your 100, even if some of it is not going your way and it's not the right kind of interaction for you. And that's fine. That happens all the time. But I think being able to just position yourself, put yourself out there, talk about what you do, How do you do it? Why are you good? I know it's not very easy from the get go, and you have to spend a lot of time with yourself to go through that exercise of saying, this is the value add that I bring. And to be honest, for several years, even I couldn't identify and name what value do I bring to the table. So it takes you a while, but your network will help you identify that as well as you go through all of these conversations. So I don't have an answer on is there a forum? I think it's different ways. Like I said, people can access this. You can figure out events. You can do an outreach to strangers on LinkedIn, which might feel a lot more comfortable than your actual network for whatever the reasons are. So there are different ways you can access it. I think you need to find what works for you and go from there. And you'll go through a bit of trial and error before you know what works for you as well. So the comfort that you need to bring in about, oh yeah, actually this didn't work for me, that's fine. You have to have a little bit of a thick skin in this, is what I would also say, because a lot of times we take it very personally when something does not work out. But having a thick skin, moving on to the next, it helps you go a very long way. I hope that answered what you were getting at.
Yes. Thank you so much.
So we have a question from Pratik in the chat. I'll just read it out for you, Rakshita. It says, how is AI changing the way Meta is relooking at trust and safety on internet? Also, are there any interesting new challenges that your team is facing these days? And if you can throw some light on them.
Yeah, I think I might not be able to throw a ton of light on how Meta is operating because I'm not actually here as a Meta spokesperson, and I have to be very conscious of that. But AI is actually not throwing new challenges at us. What it is doing for us is it's helping us solve some of the low-hanging fruits of challenges much more faster and efficiently, which means that we have a lot more time to solve some of the bigger problems that we were looking at. When it comes to interesting new challenges that my team is facing, so I work in trust and safety, which means every week, every month, there is a new trust and safety problem. We work on real-world events, we work on the war, we work on elections, we work on mass shootings. There is just so much happening in the world, and the way social platforms are being used is also changing. So one event is very different from another event, even if it may have happened in the same month. So each of those events become a differently new challenge that we work on and requires a different kind of a response strategy, requires a different kind of communication strategy, different kind of resolution. So yeah, with AI, I don't think our challenges are increasing. I actually think it's decreasing because it's helping us take care of a lot much faster. Hope that answers your question, Pratik.
Okay, we'll move on to Pramit and Bhuvna. Pramit, you can ask your question.
Thank you so much, Rakshita, for taking this session. This is very helpful because I also come from the policy space and I've been a former land fellow as well. Your approach to how you're seeing these sectors evolve is quite interesting, which is why I had just one very specific question to ask, which is in the tech policy domain that you see unfolding, which sectors, what gaps do you see which still remain unaddressed, which could tell us what could be certain opportunities which may unfold in the immediate future so far? That's my question. Thanks.
Thanks, Pramit. I'd say it's hard to say. There is no straight answer to your question. It's very hard to say what will unfold. But what I recommend watching out for from your perspective is how is the product being used? How are different AI tools being used? How is social media being used? And typically, obviously, when it comes to social media and these products, there are good users who are using it as intended, and then there are bad users. And when I say bad users, there's misuse of product, misuse of AI, things like that. So I would say follow that. Follow how the misuse can potentially happen. Follow how it is maybe still happening even now, and maybe there are policies not developed around it. One thing on the policy side, and when it comes to social media and most of tech, not all of tech, is AI can be an efficiency tool, but AI can also be used for wrongdoing. And when it comes to the wrongdoing, there isn't A huge distinction between how non-AI tools are used for bad content versus AI tools. It doesn't quite matter. So I'd say maybe follow along how these tools, how social media is being leveraged today. And that might give you a bit of direction into how policy might need to evolve over time in terms of solving for it. Again, when I say trust and safety and AI, it's a beast of a problem. We haven't even scratched the surface on solving for it. So research a bit on some of these things, and hopefully that gives you a bit of direction on where to go and what it'll look like. It's very hard to say. We are really at that inflection point where it's hard to say what are the problems that will emerge, what are the roles that will emerge, how will we support all of these. But we're just following the trail right now to really understand how people are using our tools.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Fofna, of course, and thank you team for organizing this. The answers have been really insightful. My question was regarding transitions, so it would also relate to the first question that was asked. I identify as an early career professional. I'm around 2 years into a business research role, but my academic background has been sociology. I studied it for my undergrad and masters, and after entering the workforce, I realized I enjoyed the business world a little more and I would want to go back to the dev sector later in my career. So I was curious, as I'm trying to move organizations, one of the forefront answers I'm getting, oh, I don't have a BTech or I don't have an MBA. I was just curious if you'd have any thoughts on how big organizations or legacy organizations treat degrees, because that is the answer I'm getting. And I'm a little in denial that why, if I have the skill sets, if I can learn, I don't know, reading a profit and loss statement on my own, why do I need to justify having a finance degree? Any thoughts on that and any advice on how do I make that process more efficient? As is being discussed, networking and your cultural capital plays a big role in that. So networking is a big part of my, say, job switching process. I'm reaching out to the people who I think are cool based off of their social profiles and understanding the interview process or how that switching process. But I am just being ghosted off the bat because no MBA on my profile. It says an MA sociology. So just curious on how do I circumvent that if I don't want to do an MBA.
Yeah, I think this is a dilemma that I hear about quite often, Bhuvna, and especially early stages when we are trying to navigate transition, all of that. The degrees piece is interesting. I think there are a set of companies that are interested in degrees, and that really matters to them. But there are a set of companies that really care about what you bring to the table, irrespective of the degree you hold. When I'm hiring, and a lot of my peers as well, when we are hiring, we really care about the kind of work you've done before, the kind of work you can come in and do, irrespective of the degrees you've had or the job roles you've had before. You might, as you go through this experience, you will identify which companies care about degrees and which companies don't care about degrees. And degrees are important for a lot of job roles, for a lot of the traditional ladder that we have. You spend a certain amount of years, you grow up, so on and so forth. That's one career path where degrees are important. So I wouldn't say it's entirely not important, but I think you have to identify which companies care about it versus the others. I myself actually don't have a master's degree, and I evaluated doing it several times and eventually realized that the ROI for me was very limited. But I did have colleagues who went ahead and did this because they wanted to make very significant changes in their career path. So I think it's up to you. And if you feel like this is not something that you want to do, that's a absolutely fine call to make. I think you just have to identify which companies would be willing to bypass that. The other piece that I would just hone in on and emphasize is branding. When you go into an interview, when you go into a network, branding yourself the right way in relation to the job that you're applying for is important. We are very used to saying, oh, I don't have the degree, I don't have the qualification, but I can do it. I think figuring out what you've done in the 2 years of experience you've had, Bhuvna, that correlates to the kind of skills that will be required, and bringing that up in the interviews or in your conversations will be important. To say, hey, I've worked on this project. I required these 5 skills that I demonstrated, which I know is required in this job that I'm applying for. And even though I don't have the technical expertise which I can come in and pick up, I have everything else to support and be successful in this job. So figuring out your branding in that process becomes important. I also relate to this situation a bit because I also transitioned from trust and safety to sales. And it was a very difficult transition for me because, again, I had no experience and they would rather hire people with previous sales experience than me. And over time, it was about figuring out really what skills are relevant in trust and safety that I have and are going to be relevant in sales. And I still have, even though I don't have the core technical sales skill, which I will build on the job. So finding that parallel becomes really important if the degree is not the route you want to take.
That makes sense.
That helps.
Yeah, definitely it helps. Thanks, Vatsla. Thanks, Rakshita.
Hi, everyone. So I just had a quick question. Since I am an early career communications professional, I wanted to ask, since AI is being increasingly used in the initial screening process, how can a candidate navigate that? And secondly, since we do not have a linear career pathway, and Bhuvna also asked this similar question, so how can someone from a communication background enter into, say, a tech company? So what's the way we can navigate that?
Yeah, I think to your first question, I wouldn't know the right answer there because I think everyone is definitely using AI. You might be able to find better answers through AI on how to navigate getting through the filtering process than through me. In terms of the second question about transitioning and moving into the new roles, I go back to, again, what kind of problems do you want to solve for? Do you want to solve communications related problems? Do you want to move into policy related problems because through your work, that's what you think is you're more passionate about? Do you actually want to drop all of that and work on business development because for some reason that has been very interesting to you and you've worked on it because you have a family business on the side which enabled you to look at that side of it? What does that look like for you? So using that as your starting point when thinking about tech is very important because there are so many roles within the tech industry that you could be doing and you can't necessarily apply to everything. So really starting with what do I want to solve for? And sometimes it's very hard to identify what do I want to solve for without even knowing what's out there. And that's why I also suggest looking at job portals. That's why I suggest looking at career pages of different companies to really understand what kind of roles are they hiring for. Because sometimes there'll be a role that will pop up that you've not even thought about its existence, and you will find something new and interesting through doing just that process and understanding how companies work. Going back to LinkedIn, seeing who is working on it. Are there people doing this job today? So it's, again, do that homework, do extensive research, and you'll be able to figure out how to navigate and what are you really interested in within the tech industry. Because again, it's very non-traditional roles as well. Not all of us are engineers, not all of us are data scientists. We're all doing very non-tech roles in a tech industry right now.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I think we will put a stop to the Q&A right now. Aditi, I think we can start with a vote of thanks.
So, as today's amazing session ends, I would like to thank everyone who made it possible. So, I would start with Rakshita. We're really grateful for having you. You took us along to unlearning and staying curious and to how our identity is not defined by one role. We'll all definitely keep our expertise close but build a tech fluency going forward. I'm very sure of that. Sincere thanks to our moderator and president, Vatsla Srivastava, for leading today's session so effortlessly, navigating our intention for the session with tech, networks, risk-taking, whatnot. Our leadership, Ayushi Vaishnav and Nishtha Jetli, thank you for your guidance and keeping the process so seamless. A special thank you to our core team, Garima Panigrahi, Manas Joshi, Vinayak Bhardwaj and Valentine Milkudi. Your hard work behind the scenes made today's event possible. We're equally grateful to our advisory, Pratik Pathak, Nandita Koshal, and Nupur Vij for your constant support and encouragement. A special mention to Dr. Aditi Parikh and Dishant Thapani for their contributions to research and design that helped shape our today's event. We also have with Sarjana here. Thank you for documenting today's discussions. And finally, I thank all of you all who joined us today. Your participation, your questions, your enthusiasm. That's all what made the session actually meaningful. And with that, I once again thank each one of you to be a part of this event. Have a wonderful day ahead.
Thank you so much, everybody. And for those who've joined us for the first time, if you'd like to stay connected with us, reach out to us if you want to join our chapter. And I just want to thank each and everybody for the questions were amazing. Thank you so much, Rakshita. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great morning, afternoon, evening, based on wherever you're joining from, and stay connected with us. Thank you.